Okay. Carson Tades Slugchud to Williams Ish. My name is Carson Shaver. I'm from the Upper Skagit Indian tribe and I'm from the Williams family. And the thesis of my project is that indigenous peoples, specifically in my case, the Upper Skagit Indian tribe, should not be classified as a hunter-gatherer society. And I mean, our history in and of itself should not be classified as a hunter-gatherer society. And what I'm arguing in my project is that what we practiced is what modern day people and modern day science calls permaculture, or there's efforts called agroforestry and edible ecosystems. These are all practices that I I don't believe, I know were traditionally practiced in these areas. And so I think I think just merely acknowledging that this stuff is how the land was managed is a huge step in and of itself, because the term hunter gatherer, using that as a label for society, essentially paints, or it solidifies, that primitive inferior lifestyle that was the narrative that was written ever since the colonial the colonial settler states arrived. Ever since they arrived, that has been a narrative that has been passed down for generations, and that comes from when they first showed up and they had those early journal recounts. The first thing they realized is that we didn't practice monoculture agriculture, which is the practice of planting one crop in a singular plot for hundreds of acres, and you only have one plot there, which is super harmful to the environment because it cuts your biodiversity down to basically nothing. And then it's also not regenerative on the soil whatsoever. And so when they saw that we didn't practice these things that they thought were the most advanced agricultural practices in the world at that time, and they saw that we didn't do that, and that we didn't have these, what they in their mind is controlling the wild or controlling nature. We didn't have that. We didn't have that monocultural, super condensed area with one crop. And to them, that, I believe, that is what passed down the hunter-gatherer society that we see passed down today, because they didn't understand our agricultural practices. And to be fair, they didn't take the time to necessarily understand either. And so one of the one of the things that I argue is that had we been a hunter-gatherer society, and that is how we managed our game, our plants, our resources for thousands of years, without enhancing the land or practicing some form of regenerative practices within that, we would have depleted our resources a very, very long time ago. Like, they would have been gone long before the colonizers ever came. We would have been in the same state that Europe was in when they came here. Wild game gone, biodiversity losing. That would have been us had we not been practicing regenerative practices. And the only reason why I say that is because there is a book that I've been reading, and this is just an example that I'm pulling out of this. This book here is called Keeping It Living. It's about, essentially, it's basically trying to prove that Native people, I'm using this for my final, by the way, it's proof that Native people have been purposefully cultivating foods in the Pacific Northwest as in that regenerative way. And so, page 13 of this book, it mentions that on average, every family was harvesting about 10,000 bulbs per season. And assuming that like a village, for example, has 1,000 people in that community, there's 10 people per family. That This book did the math, And according to those numbers, there would have been annually an annual harvest of 1 million bulbs per tribal community. 1 million bulbs is not a small number. We all know this. 1 million bulbs is a lot of camas. If this is the standard by which we're going off of, 1 million bulbs is insane. It's a lot of bulbs. And if we harvested that every single year consistently, we would have to have some form of enhancement or regenerative practices, or else they'd be gone. It wouldn't be at that number every year. To have a consistent camas harvest, like such that in and of itself, we'd have to practice regenerative practices and purposefully cultivate or encourage this camas growth. But that's just one of the things that I am proving or bringing in as sources and examples in my project to say, like, had we not had some form of enhancement, some form of regenerative practices, which is permaculture, we would have never been able to do that. We would have never practiced that. And I guess one of the things that I should have mentioned in the beginning is that permaculture it's the idea of replicating an ecosystem, a natural and flourishing ecosystem, into agricultural practices. So you're replicating an ecosystem that creates an abundance of food while also protecting biodiversity, protecting the soil. Protecting biodiversity and protecting the soil. And so you get to do that while also producing food for yourself, and you're also promoting old growth, tree growth, because you want those trees to grow old over time. And eventually, maybe one day when it is old growth, you get lumber from it as well. And that is what we practiced. And I think, I'll get to this in a second. Well, actually, I'll just bring it up now. In the beginning, I mentioned agroforestry as one of the terms. And agroforestry is the new term that's being used to start practicing permaculture. It's using permaculture to regenerate the land, which I think that is what we need to start doing to reclaim our history, is practicing this agroforestry practices in order to regenerate our forests and rebuild those edible ecosystems that our people used to rely on. But I chose this topic because I think by enhancing our ecosystems into edible ecosystems and reviving this form of agriculture that is a part of our history, I think that is the key to achieving a very big part of true tribal sovereignty. I think by doing this, if tribes can begin reclaiming this history and implementing it into their communities, we can achieve true tribal sovereignty. And I say that, for one, because if you have different tribes practicing these things, if you have a few different tribes practicing these permacultural efforts, you can essentially revive the tribal economies. You can begin trading between communities once again. Those traditional trades where we would do seed preservations, seed exchanges, when we would exchange seeds between communities. That is tribal economy. And we could do that for food as well. Say for tribes here in Western Washington, we grow native foods that are essential, or not essential, they are essential, but native foods that only grow in Western Washington. And then Eastern Washington tribes grow foods that can only grow in Eastern Washington. There is a trade-off that can happen there between those two tribes. And instead of depending on the U.S. federal government for food assistance, we can depend on other tribes for food assistance. And in my opinion, that is true tribal sovereignty for all tribes, because it's like Winona LaDuke, I believe that's her name. She once said, "You're not sovereign if you can't feed yourself." And I think that's a I think that's very true, because who are we to say we're sovereign nations in the eyes of the US government if we can't even manage to feed ourselves and we have to look to them for food? There's nothing sovereign about that at all, but I would much rather look to other tribal nations for food than the US federal government. But yeah, another thing that obviously falls under this is food sovereignty. And that's another reason why I picked this topic, because I'm a huge advocate for food sovereignty. I'm the biggest advocate for permaculture ever, I think, man. Like, I think that this is the key to being able to feed ourselves. And should we get this on such a large scale that it's economically viable for tribes, like, we could feed our community members. Imagine not being able to pay for, or imagine not having to pay for groceries. Imagine you didn't have to pay for that. Imagine how much of a relief that would be for tribal members if they didn't have to pay for groceries, because we were sustainably growing food, and that is now, like, tribal members don't have to pay for food because it's given to them. That's food sovereignty right there. And I think with large scale, or yeah, large permaculture plots, we could make this happen. And through that food sovereignty argument, I believe that this is important because there'd be less disease. We'd be having so much more organic and healthy foods, just like the way there was. And on top of that, it'll bring back tribal hunting. It'll bring back the enhancement of habitat that will allow the elk herds and the deer herds to be so much stronger and so much bigger. Because if you if you look at the logging areas now, or the forests now, you look at the forests, all the farmland, all these things are impacting these herds. If we bring back these natural, or they're man-made, but they are natural, um, edible ecosystems, and we live by that honorable harvest that our people have lived by for thousands of years. You don't take all of it. Say you leave a quarter of your harvest for the birds and the animals. Tribal hunting will be enhanced. Those that wild game comes in to eat. Tribal hunting is there too, and that is a part of food sovereignty as well. And so that's just another benefit of this, and that's why I love this topic, because I'm like, man, this just works so well for tribal members. And by enhancing the forest, you're enhancing the river. It helps the river. It's a ripple effect. Repairing these ecosystems is a ripple effect, and in turn, it protects the river. And so, oh, yeah. Another thing, I just think this topic is tribal empowerment. This is what will truly empower tribes if we hop into this industry, because agriculture is an industry that we belong in as Native people. I was reading this book that I was possibly thinking about using for research in this project, and his name was Doolittle. He's from Europe, which is why I'm probably not going to use it now. Um, he had mentioned that America in the 1800s was recognized as a superpower for global food production. But what people may not have realized is that it was a leader in global food production prior to colonization, prior to contact. And this is a history that we are only just now beginning to tap into and be like, wow, they had it figured out. Like, they were the leaders in food production prior to contact. And that's the narrative I want to recover, that we were more than just a hunter-gatherer society aimlessly wandering, in that romanticized sense that we were running around with the land, hunting and fishing, like we were, but it was more than just hunting and fishing. Not in the sense that modern day people see hunting and fishing. It was a very managed and controlled event that we did sustainably, while also enhancing it to do more than just feed ourselves, but also feed the rest of our ecosystems. And I think by recovering this, it's an untapped industry that will help tribal economies, like, and I mean actual economies, like, it will make them dollars. It's a I think it can be an economically viable solution to a lot of the problems that we have, and that's why I talk so passionately about it, and I'm looking forward to doing good on this project. And so, yeah, I'd like to give thanks to Scott Schuyler, my mentor at Upper Skagit. He's the policy and cultural representative, and he's helped me out a lot, and he kind of helped me dive down this rabbit hole a long time ago when he had mentioned that we used to do the controlled burns for berries and camas, and how we've always advocated for our elk and deer populations, the wolves, the grizzlies, the salmon, and ever since then I've been going down this rabbit hole on habitat enhancement. And so, thank you, Dahadoop Chuck. That's all I got. Thank you.